Welcome to Running in the 70s, where we interview, meet, and get to know athletes of all kind who were running in the 70s. I'm your host, Matthew Kleinowski. Today on the podcast, we're in Michigan with somebody who grew up in Cleveland and a big part of Cleveland sports and running history. Welcome today on the podcast, Ron Addison. Hi, Ron.
Hi, I'm happy to be here.
Ron, let's tell people your origin story in competition. When, where, and how did you get involved in your first race or your first sports competition?
That could be a long story, so I'll do my best. As a kid, I played sports like most kids in my era, and I'm glad I grew up in the 70s in Cleveland. We played football all fall, basketball all winter, outside in the snow, and baseball all spring and summer. And I just did that every day, all day for years. Concurrently, I loved to run. I didn't know running was a sport, but I loved to run as a youngster. And so instead of taking my bike to my friend's house, I would run over there. Literally not walk, but I would run just because I enjoyed it. My mother would say, "Hey, can you take this 25 cents to run down to the corner and get a loaf of bread?" And I would literally run to the corner and buy a loaf of bread and run home just because I enjoyed it so much. But when I played football and baseball, of course, my running ability helped me. But then fast forward a number of years when I was going into high school, I was planning, as most kids do, to go out for the football team. But I had a cyst in my throat here and I had to have it taken out. So I was in the hospital for a few days. I missed the first week of football practice. And if you missed the first week, you were done. You couldn't go out. That was just the way it was. Then I went to orientation at Rhodes High School. And back then, high school was 10, 11, and 12. All the different sports coaches came in to talk about their sport. And a guy named Jim Zickas started talking about cross country. I said, "Cross country? What the heck is that?" I started asking around and I found out that was a sport where you ran. And I said, "Oh, that's the sport for me." So I went out for cross country. That was my first organized competition ever. I never played organized sports, just sandlot.
I can relate to a lot of that. When you got to the 10th grade cross country, what equipment did you have? Did you get uniforms? And what was that like then as part of the team?
I was the new guy. I went to my first practice and nobody knew me. I was from Mooney Junior High School. I had a pair of Converse, of course. I'm sure I had some baggy shorts and a ratty old t-shirt. And nobody back then had any real equipment, but at least the other guys on the team all did have running shoes, except for me. And the first day of practice, the coach just said, "You guys go out and run 5 miles." And all the older guys knew the courses and the routes. And so they picked a 5 mile route. And I just started running with them. Now, even then, I was intuitive enough to know that I don't want to win this workout. And that's not a way to make friends, but I don't want to lose the workout either. So we're running, there's 25 or 30 of us. And as after 1 mile, 2 mile, 3 miles, the better guys are in the front and the not so good guys are in the back. I'm with the better guys and they're all looking at me like, "Who are you? And where'd you come from?" And I wasn't doing anything except just maintaining the pace. I wasn't talking. I wasn't pushing the pace. I was just there. And at the end of the 5 mile run, I was there with the leaders and it just came natural to me. That's the way it was.
That says something about being able to manage your drive of competition. At that point, how competitive a person did you consider yourself?
I consider myself very competitive and very stubborn, but not overly. They talk about Michael Jordan never wanting to lose at anything. I respect that. And he's one of the greatest athletes in the world, and I'm not. But to win at all costs and to always win at everything was not my motivation. But I did want to win. I wanted to win fairly and I wanted to work hard and win. And when I started to win, it was a lot of fun. I got to tell you that.
How did that first season go?
The first race I ever ran in my entire life, it was a dual meet against somebody. And I was fourth man on the team and seventh or eighth overall in the race. And I learned a lesson in that very first race from some of the senior guys, a guy named Alan Kofsky, who was a mentor of mine. And I was in the chute. I had never run a cross country race before. And I was in the chute and some guy tried to walk by me and I let him go. And my friend Alan said, "No, you can't let that happen. When you're in the chute, you got to fight for position." And so I always remembered that lesson that I learned from him. But I was excited. I wanted to win. I wanted to do the best I can, but I had realistic expectations and I was just happy to be fourth man and seventh in the race. I was very happy. I wasn't disappointed that I lost the meet. So
You'd loved running.
Yep.
What was your coach like in terms of providing workouts and knowledge? And when did you get a pair of shoes?
And we were halfway or two-thirds of the way into the season, and I was still wearing my Converse flats, even for races. Everybody else had spikes for races. I was wearing these Converse for training and races. About halfway through the season, the assistant coach, Steve Krinchek, who ran at Rhodes, he ran 4:15 for a mile in 1965 and went to the University of Miami and ran in college. Then when he came back to Cleveland, he was the assistant coach. But he came up to me one day and he said, "You really need to get yourself a pair of running shoes." And so I did. But my coach, Jim Zickas, I was so fortunate. He's got a good story. He was a pole vaulter at Bowling Green, and he was a track athlete, but he was a football coach. He was an all-around good guy, all-around athletic guy. I don't know the history, but he had never coached distance runners before. My sophomore year in cross country, it's his first year ever coaching distance runners. But he was a good coach. He learned and he researched and he asked questions. And when he made a mistake, he admitted he made a mistake and he moved on. But I was just so lucky to have him as a coach because over the course of my career, I had a really successful high school career. I was very lucky to have him because without him, that wouldn't have happened. So,
How good was your team your sophomore year?
uh, we didn't qualify for state. I think we're second or third in the conference meet, the Senate we called in Cleveland. We were steady, but we weren't exceptional. We were good. We weren't horrible. We were good.
You went to track also. What was the condition and what kind of track did you have to do spring workout?
Rhodes High School, we had an indoor track.
Oh, that's a great track. Yeah.
Everybody knows about the 10 laps of the mile Rhodes indoor dirt track that has a hairpin turn in it. So we trained there in the winter. And then in the spring, we had a cinder track outside, but the cinder track was well maintained though. Our coach and staff at Rhodes did a really good job of maintaining that track, but it was a cinder track. We had races there too, of course.
How did your sophomore year go in track?
I ran really well. I ran 4:22 for a mile. I forgot what I ran indoors, but my coach could see I had some talent. So he fudged, to be honest with you, to get me into the fast heat of the Mansfield relays, which turned out fine because I did good. I think out of 15 people in the field, I was probably seventh or eighth or something. So it wasn't like I was, way in the back and didn't deserve to be there. At the Mansfield relays, my sophomore year, my teammates and I, we won the distance medley. So we got off to a good start. Then I ended up running 4:22 was my best time, and I didn't qualify for state.
How did your identity as a scrappy playground athlete change or morph into I'm a runner? Did that happen for you during that year?
Yeah, oh, absolutely it did. First of all, when I said earlier that I was competitive, I was also very stubborn. In middle school, I got in a lot of fights just because I was stubborn. And bullies would pick on me, and then I would not take it, and we'd end up in a fight. And that happened all through middle school. I was always in fights. And nobody got seriously hurt because they're in middle school. But I was always stubborn. I was very stubborn about everything. So I think that even though I wasn't all committed to win at any cost, I certainly wanted to win, and I was stubborn about stuff. When I was in middle school, I was just a guy. And when I got to high school, people started to take notice of me. And to be perfectly honest with you, that fed my ego, and I loved that. My friend Alan Costy told me when I was a freshman in cross country and starting to have some success, he literally told me, "Don't get ahead of yourself. Don't get cocky." And I always remembered that. I was always confident. I always wanted to do the best I can, but I always also tried to be cool about stuff and not obnoxious and not cocky and not mean.
Do you remember during your sophomore year meeting, befriending anybody from any other schools, or how soon did that happen when you got to know your competitors?
But I got to know my competitors probably not till I was a junior, because even though I had a successful sophomore year from my perspective and from my high school coach's perspective and my teammates' perspective, I wasn't really a state level athlete. My sophomore year, I was just a guy who ran track and I was having fun and not realizing even at this point where it could take me. And then over the summer, I was lazy. I didn't run that much. And my father used to say, "Shouldn't you be out training?" And I don't know what excuse I gave him, but I really did not run that much that summer after my sophomore year. And then when the fall came and I ran cross country, I trained with the team and I trained hard and I was at every practice and raced hard. And I went to the state meet and I was 16th, which was very disappointing to me. And at that race, I realized there's a lot of people out there that have a lot of talent, that work harder than you do, that are smart racers. And that really was a big lesson for me because I came back from the state meet where I was 16th, very disappointed. So then for the rest of that fall and the rest of that winter, I ran 10 miles every day. And that's really when the light bulb came on for me. And then I knew that I wanted to have a successful outdoor track season, which I did.
The parallels continue. I finished 16th in my state meet. I don't think I was disappointed. It was a surprise. We had a substitute coach. Our coach had quit. So we had a guy who was
Yeah.
a baseball player and just said, I don't know. I'll drive you guys to meet. You do whatever you do.
Oh, wow.
But that's interesting. So you had a taste of success. And is that all state? You got a medal with the Ohio State meet your junior year?
I don't remember if I did or not. I don't,
Let's talk about your progression then. You had a kind of meteoric rise at some point after that fall. Let's talk about your performance through the rest of high school.
my junior year in high school, I just won all of our dual meets. I won most of the competitions. I guess I won them all until the state meet, which I don't know if Mike Burley, and he would be a good guy to put on this podcast. And I knew Mike in high school, as you mentioned earlier, when I was a junior in high school, that's when I really got to know my competitors. And Mike Burley was one of them. If I may say, he was a swimmer and he had won the state meet in some distance swimming in the winter. So when he started track, he was a little behind the eight ball. And I beat him at regionals, I beat him at sectionals, but he kept getting closer. And everybody told me he was going to be my competition at state. He ran a good race. He ran a smarter race than I did, and he was a really good athlete. And he ran 4:14.7, and I ran 4:14.9 at the state meets. He won, and I got second. Now, Mike went on to be an Olympian in the modern pentathlon. And I used to see him at competitions when I was in college and after college.
What was your best accomplishments in high school? What was the crowning bits of your high school career then?
The latter part of my senior year, because I won the state meet in the mile. I was a state cross country champion. So I went from 16th to first. In track, I won the mile and the half mile just about every meet I ran. A couple of times I lost the 800. Most of the time I won. When I got to the state meet, I won the mile. I think I was fifth or sixth in the 800. I went on to the All-American High School Championships in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And I really should have won that race. I made a tactical mistake. I wasn't really used to running in the crowd, and I made a tactical error right coming off the last turn that cost me the race. The winner ran 4:05.7, and I ran 4:05.9. Then I went to the National Junior Championships, which encompassed high school seniors and college freshmen. I got second in the 1500 to a college freshman, and I beat the guy that had beat me in Louisiana. And then I got to represent the United States in competition against the Russians that summer in Sacramento, California. And in that race, we were all within half a second. There was a Russian me, but we were within a half a second of each other. And I beat the college freshman that had beat me at the National Junior Championships. So that was the summation of my high school career. And
Let's
then
talk about that. Let's talk about that tactical error. What did you do wrong?
first of all, I ran smart most of the race until off the last turn. I was in the lead with 400 to go. Actually, we ran 2:10. We ran like 65, so we're 2:10. Then I think we ran another 59 or 60, but I felt really good. So coming off the third turn down the home stretch, I took the lead. So with a lap to go, I was in the lead, but I wasn't really running hard. And then a couple of guys went blowing by me, but I was smart enough to let them go because I figured if I went with them, I would die, and subsequently they died. So I think maybe coming down the backstretch, I was probably fourth, but I was in a good position. But I let too many guys go by me and I got boxed. And in the last turn, I was boxed. So instead of what I should have done that I know now is I should have just waited and it would have opened up and I would have had a path coming off the middle of the turn. I slowed down to, I was practically walking. I let a bunch of guys go by me. I moved out 3 lanes and I started sprinting for all I was worth. And I passed 6 guys. And the guy that beat me, Reed Fisher from Texas, I was closing him. If the race would have been 5 yards farther, I would have passed. So when he ran 4:05.7 and I ran 4:05.9, I was flying. If another 2 or 3 or 5 yards, I would have blown by him.
What year was your senior year in high school?
1972.
1972. I want to talk about your view of the wider world. We'll get to colleges talking about you and your vision of what will become of you after high school. But what was your view of the wider world of running? This is the big year, of course, with Frank Shorter, Steve Prefontaine. in the early 70s, when did you become a fan of or pay any attention to the bigger world of running?
You know, when I was a junior in high school in 1971, I really started, track was such a big part of my life. And I started to see what a cool sport it was. And even on my team, we had a good track team. We had full participation. We had pole vaulters and shot putters and discus throwers. And I was friends with all those guys. And we just had a really fun, good experience. So I became aware of track as a worldwide sport, especially considering the 72 Olympics were coming up. I remember watching on TV and being very interested at the pin relays. Marty LaCory and Jim Ryan ran the Dream Mile. It was on like CBS Wild World of Sports. Marty LaCory beat Jim Ryan. And I remember watching that race when I was 16 years old and realizing that track and field was really a sport. And I was aware of Dave Waddle and Sid Sink at Bowling Green already and how good of athletes they were. And they both subsequently made the Olympic team in 72. Yeah, it was my junior year in high school. I knew what was going on. And my senior year in high school, I was really plugged in.
That out.
Morning's what?
All right, let's talk. I wanted to ask you then about your self assessment. You watch Jim Ryan and Marty LaCory, it's on TV. What was your vision of your future in running?
That I could do that. I wanted to, I could do that. So I didn't quite get there, but I wanted to. So
What role did your coach, your school play in the recruiting you got from colleges? How did that go?
I just was recruited by literally basically every college in the United States. I was contacted by over 200 colleges and universities. My coach was a really smart guy. He wasn't really involved in the recruiting process at all because back then you had the phone on the wall. My phone was ringing off the hook at home. I was getting letters every day. Now, first of all, my high school coach, when I say he didn't really involve himself in the recruiting process, that's a compliment, not a complaint. If I needed anything from him, he was there. I can tell you, though, that he did hope that I would go to Bowling Green, and he did put me in touch with Mel Broad at Bowling Green. He knew of me anyway. The point is, Mel Broad recruited me pretty hard, and Dave Waddle used to call me on the phone and say you could come to Bowling Green. That's why coaches do that. When you're a high school kid, that's pretty cool to hear from Dave Waddle call you and say you should come to Bowling Green. I seriously considered Bowling Green. In September of my senior year, before I had even won the state cross country meet, Mike Tomasello, the recruiting coordinator from the University of Tennessee, called me. And he said, we'd like to have you down for a visit. And for whatever reason, I didn't have any interest in going to Tennessee. I said, why would I do that? He says, this might interest you. At the end of November, we're hosting the NCAA cross country championships and you can come down and watch the meet. And I said, yeah, that sounds like fun. And so I went to Tennessee on this recruiting trip and I had the greatest time ever. By October of my senior year, I knew I wanted to go to Tennessee. I didn't tell anybody, but I kept thinking, what could be better than this? And as I kept continuing to get recruited, I didn't make a firm decision. I didn't commit to Tennessee. I didn't commit to anybody else. And I kept taking visits. But the whole time I was struggling because I'm thinking, Tennessee's the place, but I shouldn't sell myself short and not visit other places. I was conflicted. In the end, Tennessee was the place. And I went there and I had a great career. So I'm glad I did.
Let's stay in high school before we move on to Tennessee. About your other competitors. You became friends and trained with runners from other schools before your high school career was over.
Yeah, I got to know guys like Joe Hurd from Medina. Don Jernigan was from Mentor. Glenn Wilburn from Austintown Fitch Glenn Wilburn was from Amherst High School. I got to know the guys at Austintown Fitch. One time, Pete Haddich, me, Joe Hurd, Don Jernigan, and I forget another guy. We all went to the University of Cincinnati the same weekend for a recruiting visit. And the coach there later, he said, Ohio is a really good sport for cross country and track and field. And the coach there had a good angle. He said, if you 5 or 6 guys all come to Cincinnati, it will be great. And I remember thinking, yeah, that makes sense to me. So I was actually thinking about that. It just didn't work out. But so I got to know those guys really well. We competed. I didn't socialize with most of those guys just because they lived so far away. Except to the point now that I remember when I went to cross country camps in the summer, we would be there together, with the exception of Larry Coy and Pete Haddich. Larry Coy, my coach was Jim Zickus, and Larry Coy went to Marshall. His coach was Dick Emery. Dick and Jim were good friends for years and years. And Larry was 1 year behind me. So my junior year, when we went to the cross country championships, we went together. My coach, Jim, and me and Larry and his coach, Dick, we all traveled together. So Larry and I, but leading up to the state meet, we were the only people from our respective teams to qualify. So we did some training together. We did some workouts together before we went to the state meet. Then we went to the state meet. The next year when I won, we went to the state meet together again and got to know each other really well. As a matter of fact, he and I socialized off the track. We would go out together. We would go to parties together. We would just hang out together a lot. Pete Haddich was a really good runner from Padua. We were running a dual meet, Rhodes High School versus Padua, in the spring of my junior year, and it was just pouring rain, just rain and cats and dogs on the cinder track. And Pete and I are the class of the field, of course, and we're together up front. And Pete looks over to me and he says something about running in the rain really sucks. And I said, yes, it does, but what are you going to do? And we started a little conversation. And then we finished the race. And after the race, he came up to me and he says, I like to talk in races, but nobody ever talks back. And it's like, you're the first one to ever say something back to me. And so we became good friends. And we actually would train together, and not track workouts, but on our distance days. And through the summer, we would meet and train and run together. We again went out together. He would come to my house. I would go to his house. We just became really good friends.
Neat. And that's a neat story. What kind of student were you in high school?
I was adequate. Coincidentally, I was exactly 25th percentile. I was 126th. The rank was 126th out of 504. I was a BC guy. So
Yeah. There was no interference there in your schedule and career. One more thing about high school is about the meet with Russia. How was that time of the world in the 1970s? What were you aware of beyond the borders of America, politics and international things? And what did you think about that?
even at that age, I was pretty, in my opinion, at least pretty astute about those sorts of things. So I probably knew more than most about what was going on. I knew Russia was a communist country behind the Iron Curtain, all that sort of thing. I was excited to be able to compete against them and represent the United States. When you just turned 18 and you're wearing a USA jersey, and I flew by myself from Cleveland to Sacramento and was taken to this compound where all the American team and the Russian team were there together for a week. It was just a great experience. All the Russian kids, all the Russian athletes were great. The coaches were great. They were friendly. Some of them spoke English. We communicated. And we just had a really good time. It was a really good learning experience where I think I knew it already, but I learned that countries may have conflicts, but people can get along. And also, that was my introduction to the bigger world of track and field, because I met a lot of college freshmen and a lot of really good high school seniors, such as myself, that people like Harold Schwab, a hurdler, Craig Virgin, the 2-miler from Illinois, Mark Schilling, a 1,500-meter guy that went to San Jose State University. I think Matt Centrowitz, met all these guys for the first time. And then for the next 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, I would see them in competitions all the time. And the first time we ever met was during that dual meet against Russia. So it was really an awesome experience.
By the time you got to Tennessee, had things changed in your world from the day you first went to your meet? Obviously, your training changed. You changed your understanding that you needed to train off season and in between, but nutrition, equipment, tracks, had you been running on better quality tracks by the end there? Did the sport seem to be changing yet by the time you reached Tennessee?
Not really, just a little bit. I don't think the sport changed as much as I did. It just, the better I got and the more experience I had, I got better equipment, but I bought it. When you're in high school, what do? I remember buying my first pair of Tokyo spikes, which was pretty cool. Paid $17 for them, and that was a lot of money back then. My dad said, "You're paying $17 for a pair of spikes?" But it was the tracks I ran on were better. I ran the state meet in Columbus, which was a all-weather track. When I ran at LSU, Louisiana State University was where I ran my 405 in high school. That was a really nice track, really good facility. When I ran against the Russians at Sacramento, actually, that was a dirt track, come to think about it. But the equipment was starting to get better, but there wasn't really any monumental changes that I noticed. And Nike wasn't even a thing yet. They were Blue Ribbon Sports then and just starting to put some product into the marketplace.
How did Dave Waddle handle you going to Tennessee instead of Bowling Green?
I'm sure he was horribly disappointed.
All right. So Tennessee is a lot, but
obviously I want to make sure that people know I'm being sarcastic. He was
of course.
I knew him a little bit. Even when I was in college, I would see him in competitions and we knew each other enough to say hi. And I certainly even today, I go back and watch his race sometimes when he won the gold medal. It's awesome. But no, he and I never spoke about it again. What are you going to do?
Yeah. Yeah. All of us watch that race over and over again. Okay. You went from 504 people in your class to Tennessee and big university. How did you adjust your freshman year? And what was different about you as a scholarship athlete than the average freshman going in? How were you treated and what was life like?
Tennessee, and this is one of the reasons when I went on my recruiting trip, I could perceive this. And when I was at Tennessee, everybody was treated the same. We had a very open policy. First of all, I certainly was the upper tier of high school and got a scholarship. But back then there were a lot more scholarships. So there were a lot of people on the team that were scholarship. And so it wasn't like now where maybe there's only a handful of guys that are scholarship and they might be perceived different. I wouldn't know. But at Tennessee, a lot more people were on scholarship. But we had a big team and we had a lot of walk-ons. And one of the things that made us successful at Tennessee was our coach allowed walk-ons, developed walk-ons, worked with walk-ons, treated them just as well as he did everybody else. There was no ABC class. If you're on the team, you're on the team and you got the same treatment no matter what. And when I went to Tennessee, I was obviously a small fish in a big pond, so to speak, because they had a very good history of track and field and cross country. And so I wasn't like a superstar on the team. I was just a guy hoping to make the team, so to speak. That said, my success and my good luck that year carried on because my freshman year at Tennessee, we were national cross country champions and I was fifth man on the team. So
That's a good thing to have on the wall and a good memory, no doubt. And when you ran, you were allowed to run the mile and the half mile, but was there a 2 mile? Let's go back to high school. Was there a 2 mile then?
I think this is a good rule. I think they should institute this rule now. If you ran the mile, you could run only one other event. So you could run the half or the 4x4, the 400, whatever. If you ran the 2 mile, that was the only race you could run. And I actually think that's a good rule. That said, a couple of times I ran my senior year at the Senate Championships in Cleveland on a cinder track. I ran 9:06 and Larry Coy was second. He was like 30 seconds back. So, but I ran 9:06.
How did you decide what you're going to run at Tennessee? Obviously, you can go up in distance, you can change to steeplechase. What did you run your freshman year?
I hate to say this, but my, that's one of, anyway, my, actually to go back a minute, which is a fun story. My coach, who's a smart guy, my high school coach, like my college coach is a great guy too. He's in the track and field hall of fame, blah, blah, blah. We'll talk about him later. One summer meet in Cleveland, I ran a steeplechase. I went to this track and there were hurdles on the track. And I said, what the heck is that? Somebody told me it was a steeplechase. And I went to the infield and jumped over a hurdle and said, gee, I can jump over a hurdle. So just for fun, instead of running the mile that day, I ran a steeplechase and I probably ran 10 minutes. All I know is I finished. But my coach, when he entered me into the National Junior Championships, he entered me in the 1500 and the steeplechase. And he entered me in the steeplechase in case I didn't qualify in the 15, in case I fell, if something bad happened, at least I'd have another chance, even though that was probably a pretty slim chance, of course. The funny story is I got second in the 1500 and made the team to run against the Russians. But then just for fun, I'm feeling all good. I had nothing to lose. So I decided I'd run the steeplechase. I got third.
You got a big podium finish at the national championships in steeplechase. You think of yourself as a steeplechaser then?
We did not. And my college coach was sitting in the stands and he saw me in this steeplechase. And he had a guy he was coaching at Tennessee that was a junior named Doug Brown, who's also from Michigan. And he and I are still good friends, of course. But Doug Brown had just made the 72 Olympic team in the steeplechase that very summer. And so my coach said to himself, I need another steeplechaser to replace Doug when he leaves. And so when I went to Tennessee, he moved me right away up to the steeplechase in the 5,000 instead of the mile, which I have to say was very disappointing to me and still is. But that said, he was a great coach and I had a good experience at Tennessee.
Tennessee winning national championship in cross country your freshman year. What was the success of the track team?
But my freshman year in track, it was easier back then to qualify for nationals, to be honest with you, but I qualified for nationals in the 5K. I went and ran. I didn't make the final, but Tennessee as a team, we got third. So we were solid. And then the next year when I was a sophomore, we won the national championships in track and field.
You still have the memory, no doubt, of Marty LaCory and Jim Ryan the mile, but how often did you get to run the mile, Tennessee?
Not very often, just on occasion. I ran at the SEC championships once. I ran it in a dual meet once. I used to argue with my coach. I want to run more miles, and I just didn't. So I don't know what to say about that, except I wanted to run more miles and I never had the opportunity.
By the time you finished Tennessee, you had 7 years of competitive running. What was the role of nutrition through any of that and any injuries?
Oh, I had a lot of injuries. Nutrition, not much. And again, and not to say that's right, but back then I just ate pretty much what I wanted. I wasn't stupid, but I pretty much ate what I wanted and didn't worry about it. And is what most people did. I think the advent of nutritional help is very good. I'm glad it's happening in the sport. I think that's contributing to success for a lot of people. I didn't retire from running until I was 30 years old. And nutrition was just becoming a thing as I was leaving the sport. So it's just the way it was. I always had a lot of tendonitis in my knee, mostly that sort of thing. So nothing really serious. I tore my meniscus in my left knee when I was a sophomore in college and had to have knee surgery, but that was back before scopes. So they had to really open up the knee and I missed 6 or 8 weeks. When I graduated Tennessee, I was healthy and finished on a good note.
One last thing about college life in the 70s. How much were you getting back home and what else did you do? How did academics go and how was life at Tennessee University there?
Tennessee was great. I had a great experience there. The track team, we all lived on the same floor in this dormitory. We were not in the jock dorm. Most of the other sports were in the jock dorm, but the track team was pushed out because they needed more room in the jock dorm. So we all lived on the third floor of Carrick Hall, which was just part of the student population. We had our own floor, but the building was 12 stories high and there were 4 other buildings in that complex. We, college can be as challenging or as unchallenging as you make it. I was a business major and I studied a moderate amount. I didn't study excessively. My grades weren't that great.
You were eligible. You were eligible.
There's no question about that. Give myself more credit. I graduated Tennessee in 4 years. I studied when I needed to study. I had a great time. I did a lot of fun things other than run. Looking back on it, I can't believe how we would do it because we'd take a fly or bus someplace on Friday. We'd run a race on Saturday. We'd fly our bus back, get home at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning on Saturday night, or maybe midnight or 1, go out for a couple hours, come back, sleep till 2 o'clock, get up, and then we might go caving or we might go up in the mountains. And we just had all kinds of stuff that we did for fun. Then we trained and we trained hard, we played hard. And then I did get into graduate school though. But when I was in undergraduate school, I didn't realize how important grades were. And again, this is a bad for me. I'm not bragging about it, but I probably should have focused more on academics than I did. Because when I graduated, I still wanted to run. And one of the ways to continue to run back then was if you could get into graduate school, because it was really hard to have a job and run. The shoe companies weren't sponsoring people yet like they are now. And so I wanted to get into graduate school and I found out my GPA wasn't good enough to get in. So I took the GMATs and I studied for them and I did really well. So they let me in on probation. And then once I got in, I was all good.
Nice. Any of the darker shades of the sport appear or were you aware of on the fringes at all? Any of the doping drugs, were you aware that maybe not distance running was what was happening in the sports then by the time you left Tennessee?
Well, when I left Tennessee, the only thing going on in the sports that I knew about at least was just the weight throwers all took steroids and that's all there was to it. It wasn't like just a few guys did it. If you were a weight thrower, you did steroids and that's the way it was. And that was almost accepted. Not at the college level, but outside the college level. I was aware enough of that because I would go to a lot of open competitions where there would not only be college teams, but there would be other athletes and things of that sort. Then when I graduated from college and started running more post-collegiately, I was aware again of a lot of drug use by weight throwers and things of that sort, or steroid use, I should say, not drugs. And even those guys, everybody knew it. It wasn't really that hidden. It was just the way that it was. When I say all these guys took steroids, I'm not even saying it disrespectfully. It was just that's the way it was then. That's just the way it was. So
that's an interesting part of talking about the decade. From the team success, which you have a lot of, what was your best individual accomplishments? And then we'll talk about anything you remember that didn't go the way you hoped.
Okay. Tennessee, where we won the national championships in track and field. My sophomore year, I was second in the steeplechase. My teammate, Doug Brown, won. He was a senior. I was a sophomore. I got second, so I scored 8 points. By the time I'm a sophomore in college, I've already won a national championship in cross country and very proud that I was fifth man and not sixth or seventh man. To be honest with you, I wanted to feel like I contributed. And in track, I contributed 8 points to a team victory in the national track and field championship. My senior year at Tennessee, I was third in the steeplechase in the finals in the NCAA. So I was second and third. At the Southeastern Conference Championships, my junior year, I was the MVP. I scored 28 points. I was second in the 10,000, won the steeplechase, and won the 5,000. Anytime we went to the Southeastern Conference Championships, we just all ran as many events as we possibly could to score as many points as we could. So I guess my highlight of my time at Tennessee was 2 national championships. My best individual finish was second, and I also had a third. I guess that's it.
Nice. How did you then look at what running would be for you post collegiately? What were the opportunities in terms of money, sponsorship? What happened next?
Because I was able to get into graduate school, I stayed at Tennessee, and my coach gave me graduate assistantship. So they paid my tuition and room and board. I was like still on scholarship. I mean, that was very prevalent back then. And so I trained. I went to graduate school and I trained. So I was still at college. I was still doing the exact same thing I had been doing before, except I had more responsibility with regards to mentoring some of the younger athletes and traveling to competitions to be a gopher and do the stuff that they needed. But it was all good. So in 1977, which was my year of doing that, George Malley and I were good friends from Penn State. Doug Brown, my teammate from Tennessee, held the American record at 8:23.2. George Malley and I went to the national championships. He ran 8:22.6 and I ran 8:22.8. So we both ran under the American record, but I never held the American record. And then both George and I made the national team that year. So we competed against the Russians again and other international competitions. That summer, I went to the World Student Games and got a bronze medal at the World Student Games in the steeplechase and finished the year ranked 8th in the world in the steeplechase. I don't think going to the steeplechase or the 5,000 was necessarily a bad thing for me. I just wanted to not do it right away. So,
Yeah. This is a great list of accomplishments, breaking the American record, except there was somebody a half a body in front of you at that time. It's pretty cool. I don't want to say it and sound in a negative way.
mhm.
Was there anything that you fell short in? Did you think you squeezed the juice out of your talent and ability?
No, I don't usually share this with most people, but I definitely am disappointed in my career. In all of 1978, I missed due to injury. So in 1977, I was ranked 8th in the world. 1978, I missed the whole year because of injury. Turns out, looking back upon it, even I knew it then, chiropractic wasn't a thing then. And I missed the whole year. And if I would have just gone to a chiropractor, I would have missed like a day.
How did you get injured, and what was the injury?
My injury was just, it wasn't even really an injury. The symptom was that my right hip just was so tight, I could hardly move my leg. I just had constant pain and tightness in my right hip, and I couldn't really run. I just couldn't run. After I got the injury, I was trying to run. I was trying to swim. I was trying to do all these things, and I really couldn't do anything. So I just stopped running. I couldn't do anything else. And then because I got very fortunate because I was asked to, even though I was hurt, but I think I had showed potential. So Nike asked me to come and run for their club. So I told them about my injury. They said, let's see if we can get that fixed up. And they sent me to Los Angeles to a chiropractor, and the chiropractor took an x-ray, did an adjustment. 3 days later, I was as good as new. So
Wow.
unbelievable.
Wow. That is amazing. So what was your deal with Nike?
Well, I was on the Athletics Plus Club. The deal was we got paid $1,000 a month, which wasn't much, but I was all happy. And they paid all of our training and racing expenses and travel competition and gave us all the equipment we needed. And it was a really good thing. And it was just when Nike and other shoe companies were starting to really put money into supporting athletes. In 1978, I missed because of injury. 1979, I went and I was running with the Nike team, but just because I had not run for a year, I just sucked. I just had a bad year. It was hard to get back into it, and I was struggling. But then I started to come around. In 1980, I ran the Olympic trials in the steeplechase, and I was fourth. And a lot of people know the story, but I was leading with a lap to go, and then I was second, then I was third, and I thought for sure I was going to make the team. And then John Gregorek, who was 5 or 6 seconds behind me, the guy's a 351 miler. So I thought for sure I was going to finish in third. John came up on my inside just before the finish line and we locked elbows. He finished in third. I fell at the finish line, broke my collarbone and finished fourth. And so I did not make the Olympic team. But again, I showed that I could compete at the highest levels again, but I couldn't even race that summer because I broke my collarbone. And so that was that.
What happened after that? After the Olympic trials, what was left in your racing life?
Not much because I had some significant health problems and I probably should have just quit then. I went a couple more years. Nike was very good to me. They supported me. They kept me on the team, provided me everything I needed, but I had significant health issues that I couldn't get over. So I struggled for a couple of years and then I retired. So
It's personal, but how did you process that psychologically and in your self-esteem and your self-image through that transition? It was relatively quick over a couple years, but how was going through that?
it was 2 long, miserable years. But yeah, I was embarrassed. I felt bad. I would try to race and I would race poorly. It really did hurt my ego and my self-esteem because running is who you are, to be honest with you. And in the long run, of course not. But at that point in time, that was the most important thing to me. And I'd sacrificed a lot to be there. And other people had sacrificed a lot for me. Nike was pouring money into me like everybody else. And I just wasn't performing. Looking back on it objectively, it wasn't my fault per se. It wasn't a mental issue. It was definitely a physical issue. So I retired and I probably should have retired sooner than I did. So, but I did, that said, I do feel that I didn't reach my full potential. But again, I had a great career. I got a lot of things to look back on. I had a lot of successes. I had a lot of fun, met a lot of friends. I met my wife through running. So it's all good.
Yeah, that's great. What about some of the friends that you mentioned from high school, university, and afterwards? Did you have discussions with them through this embarrassing and miserable 2 years, or were you on your own? How'd you make it through?
I was on my own because I don't want to share it with anybody. I just felt miserable and dealt with it. So,
And we don't have to spend too much time on
no, we
it.
don't.
You're smiling and laughing with the benefit of time and
Yeah, yeah,
perspective.
yeah.
What did you study in grad school?
The
How did
business.
your career go after that?
I worked in marketing sales. I was had a good career. I was lucky because when I went out to Athletics West, I was one of the few guys to get a job with Nike, a part-time job, because you had the opportunity to work part-time if you wanted to. And so I received the job with Nike, working in their promotions department in Eugene, Oregon. Literally, my job was shipping out shoes to athletes all across the country. And I would get up in the morning, do my training run, then I would work from 9 to 3, then I would go to practice, then I would go home and do it over the next day. When I needed time off for competition, I got it. But then because as things progressed over the years, I assumed more and more responsibility at Nike. All the time I was running, I was technically, unlike all the other athletes, like Kane worked for an accounting firm because he was a finance guy. Other guys had other jobs, but I coincidentally and fortunately for me worked for Nike. So I worked for Nike for 7 years. After I retired from running, I worked for them for a little bit longer. Then I moved to Colorado, got another job, and I worked in sporting goods my whole career. So marketing and sales in the sporting goods industry.
A lot of the people running in the 70s were sponsored, getting these shipments of shoes. Are you the guy that put them in the box and sent them out to these guys?
I started out literally being the guy. Nike promotions at that time, again, in 1977, even then, Nike was when I went to work for Nike and joined Athletics West, they were less than $100 million in revenue. But they really were innovative in how they treated track and field athletes. And subsequently, that they moved to doing the same thing in other sports, basketball, football, that sort of thing. When I went to work as a promotions guy at Nike, I was literally shipping the shoes and there was only like 3 people in the department. But over the next several years, the department got larger. So it did get to the point where I was deciding who got the shoes and who didn't get the shoes, that sort of thing. I was not the guy deciding how much money they would get. I was an office guy, not a shoe shipper guy. I remember one day when I got promoted to being the office guy, and this was back in the 70s, of course. And I walked into this office and sat down at this desk, and I had never had an office job, never had a desk, never really used my business background, just sat down at this desk, just started opening letters and reading the mail and answering the phone and making phone calls and figuring out what to do. And I literally had a secretary who would come in and I would dictate letters and she would write it all down in shorthand and go type it up and bring them in, and I would sign them. That's, that's how long ago that was.
That's great. You had been to Tennessee, out west. What connection did you retain with Cleveland, your family there and
Oh, my,
sports there?
yeah, my mother and father were still there, are still there. My mother and father are there. My three sisters are there. Their families are there. I have friends there. I still have high school friends there. I've never lived there. When people say, where you're from, I'm never embarrassed to say I'm from Cleveland. They always say the Lake on the Lake or make a joke about it. We all laugh. But I love Cleveland growing up. I grew up in the city. Still think it's a great community. When I go back there, I have a good time. It's a nice town. I just have good memories of growing up there. So no problems. But I never lived there again. So
And how'd you end up in Michigan?
uh, I met my wife in Oregon, and she was also an Athletics West athlete. We met there. And then when I retired, Nike had treated me real well, but I lost my running income and I needed to make more money. So I took a job at Colorado working for Frank Shorter Sportswear. Frank Shorter had a clothing line. So I became a sales manager for his company. So my wife and I moved to Boulder, and she was still racing, but she got a part-time job coaching track at CU under Jerry Quiller. So we were living in Boulder. I was retired from running. I was working full time. Sue was still training and racing and coaching at CU. So she had the summers off and she would go on the European circuit every summer. She had a better career than I did. Then after 5 years in Colorado, Frank Shorter Sports was going to go out of business. It's a long story. It wasn't Frank's fault. Some other company bought us, and that was a whole long, funny story. I was literally the last employee of Frank Shorter Sports. I closed down the business. And so my wife took a job as head coach at Florida State for cross country and assistant coach for track and field for men and women. And so we moved to Tallahassee, Florida, and I got a job for Wilson Sporting Goods. They were headquartered in Chicago, but I lived remotely in Florida and worked for Wilson. And we did that for 5 or 6 years. And then we had two little girls, and coaching was really demanding on my wife. And so Wilson wanted me to move to Chicago. So my wife and I and my two daughters, we moved to Chicago. My wife retired from coaching Division One, and I was working in marketing for Wilson Sporting Goods. And I worked for them for 5 years. And then I just wanted to change, and I didn't like the commute in Chicago and all that sort of thing. So I applied to Brunswick Bowling, and the world headquarters is in Muskegon, Michigan. So we moved to Michigan in the year 2000, and we've lived here ever since. So
Nice. I used to go to Muskegon in the 80s. Let me ask you about Boulder. The scene there was one of the amazing centers for running from the late 70s and 80s. Who's who passed through there. Were you connected to the running community, even though you weren't competing anymore? Mark Muggleton, Steve Francis, Pete Lucas, these guys I know worked with Shorter. They worked as bouncers. They talk about the story of life there, but you were in a family situation, not necessarily like some of these bachelor guy runners.
actually, surprisingly enough, I don't know those names, but I was involved in the running community. First of all, my wife was coaching track and field and cross country at CU. So I knew all the coaching staff there, Joe, Jerry Kohler, and other people. Frank, of course, was there. Now, this was the sporting goods company, not the stores. The stores was a separate business. So we manufactured and sold across the country and across the world technical running gear is what we did. But I knew Rich Castro, who was the director of intramurals there. I tell you, Boulder was more of a road running place than a track place. My wife was unusual in having her track success there back in the 70s and 80s rather than road racing success. Not a lot of track athletes trained in Boulder at that time, but she was very successful those 4 or 5 years we spent in Boulder being on the track. But I would say to the question, yes, I was certainly in tune with the running community in Boulder.
Let me ask you just to run through on your wife's behalf, since she's not on the screen now. What was her best accomplishments?
She's from Michigan. But as a junior at Michigan State University, she won the U.S. Open Championships and set the school record at 2:03. Subsequently, she went on to run 2 minutes and 1/10 of a second in the 800. She ran 4:23 in the mile, 4:04 in the 1500. She was second in the U.S. Open Championships one year in 1985. I think she was ranked number one in the U.S. in the 1500. She won a lot of races in Europe. She made 6 U.S. national teams, just a solid middle distance runner. So
Did you have a role and as an experienced runner in the discussions at the dinner table about her coaching ideas?
no,
Excellent. Good
She
to
was,
hear.
she was a really good coach, by the way. When she coached at Colorado and Florida State, she was very successful middle distance coach.
For you, looking at these people like Dave Waddle that you mentioned, that you'd see, you saw Jim Ryan, Marty LaCory. At some point, you're on the track with people like that. You're beating people like that. We're teammates with people like that. How much of a dream did that feel like to you? And how did you morph into this is who I am?
When I was in high school, I just couldn't believe this is how happy I was and how successful I was. I sometimes felt it was a dream. I said, this is too good to be true. And I guess I had that attitude all through college and even after college. As a kid growing up, I could have never have imagined having that success in anything. And I don't know what to say, but I'm very fortunate. I'm thankful for it. I'm happy it happened to me. I tried to earn it and deserve it and not be obnoxious about it. Tried to be nice to people. The whole time in my mind, I'm thinking, I can't believe this is my life. This is too good to be true. So
Yeah, it's great. Some of these maybe seem like the dark and miserable questions, but when you became, I'm not a runner anymore. How did your identity? I got to say, I had a very short career. I still think of myself as a runner.
yeah,
I ran later. I ran the steeplechase when I turned 60 to win the Ontario championship
well,
because nobody wants to run over the barriers when they're 60. So I didn't have to meet too many people.
well,
I still think of myself as a runner, even though my career ended. I didn't compete for a long time. How did your identity change when competition was over? You were able to stay in the sport with Nike and with sporting companies, but how did your identity change?
I don't think it really did. I knew that at some point in time that it had to end. It just ended sooner than I wanted. That's all. But there was going to be a transition at some time. So when I got my first real full-time job working for French Sports, I'd worked for Nike at a lot of different positions, but nothing really significant. I had a good career there. They treated me really well. I had no complaints. But then by the time I retired from running, I was already 30 years old. I didn't really have much business experience. And I was very fortunate that I got hired into French Sports in the position I did. And so I really just wanted to take advantage of that opportunity and learn the business and learn how to be a business person and learn how to do my job. And so I just threw myself into that. So my wife was still running and competing and I could live vicariously through her. But then I was just focused on doing what I had to do to take care of the family and just move on with my life. I mean, I have no regrets.
Good for you. It is a great story, Ron. It's very nice to meet you and talk with you. Let's talk about the sport, though, and changes. Being involved with Nike, seeing the technology of shoes, gear, money, the industry of sport. What are your thoughts over then from the end of your career through the changes in the sports going forward?
I don't really give it a lot of thought. My wife and I watch the national championships on TV. We watch the world championships. We follow the sport. We really know what's going on and know who the better athletes are, things of that sort. So we're certainly a fan of the sport. I don't, but as far as all the technology and the money, it's just a progression that is inevitable. And one of the things that me and all my friends who are my age that we joke about is when we look and see how many guys are running so fast, we just say it's the shoes, it's the shoes, it's the shoes. And I'm really conflicted as to how is it really the shoes? How much of it is the shoes? Is it not fair that it's the shoes? You really can't set technology back. So I guess I don't really spend a lot of time thinking or worrying about it. It's just not part of my life. I enjoy to watch the sport. I enjoy to see the performances. I enjoy watching the Olympics and the World Championships. Both my daughters ran track and field at the University of Michigan, so I'm certainly into the sport. But whether it's the shoes or the training or the nutrition or the drugs or the whatever, I don't waste too much time thinking about it.
Can you talk about your project on Cleveland sports history?
Cleveland has this thing, which I think is a great concept that should be exported to other cities. It's called Sports Legends of Cleveland Hall of Fame. So it's not really the Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame, because if that was a Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame, there would be Bernie Kosar and Jim Brown and all those sorts of people, which are all great athletes. What the Sports Legends Hall of Fame of Cleveland is, it's to honor all sports, not just track and field, for people that went to high school in the city of Cleveland. So it only started a few years ago, but they inducted a lot of people retroactively, people like Harrison Dillard and Madeline Manning and Jesse Owens and other people that I can't think of that are really world-class famous athletes, but came from the city of Cleveland. Every year they induct a couple people from every high school. So it's more, e- and it's just really a cool concept, but they do a really nice job. They have a website. They have a banquet every 2 years where they have an induction. There's a lot of pro football players that have gone from Cleveland that are in this thing. And I'm really just happy that I was inducted into it. I'm just really thrilled about that. It's not just track and field, it's for all sports. So it's a cool concept.
What else do you think runners and people want to hear from you?
I think track and field and cross country are great sports. I think it gives you a unique opportunity to make lifelong friends. And it's just really a cool sport. I'm really happy that I got involved with it. When I was in high school, senior in high school, and I was traveling to all these competitions, you need money for that. And Larry from a rival high school, Larry and his friends went out and fundraised for me to be able to send me to these competitions. So and he knows that I give him a lot of kudos for that and other publications and things.
Thanks for your time, Ron. It's really good. I think you've mentioned some names and maybe some of the people that you know personally or interacted with through your career.
Mhm.
If you think they would enjoy doing this,
Okay.
a lot of people certainly have had books written about them, probably movies and everything. But if they would enjoy this kind of interview, I have time for everybody.
Yeah, I'll keep that in mind. Very good.
It's very nice meeting you, Ron, and thank you very much for your time.
Well,
All
listen, you
right.
seem a fun, interesting guy, so I hope we can stay in touch. And I'm definitely going to go check this out, and I'm sure we'll talk again. Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed another episode of Running in the 70s. Voices, stories, and memories of athletes who were running in the 70s. Until next time, wherever you are, keep looking forward and don't forget to look back.